is the F 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 is the F
Welcome to this pronunciation video. Today we will be focusing on a new word that you might find challenging or intriguing. So let's dive into today's word. 네가, which means
You in Korean.
let's say it all together. 네가.
Today we'll be speed testing Windows 10 and Windows 11. What impact does upgrading have on performance? Well, we're about to find out. So, starting things off with the startup test, I wanted to take this time to explain what hardware we're working with because it has changed from my previous videos. We're using a Dell Latitude 7390 with an i5-8350U CPU with integrated graphics, 8 gigs of RAM, and this time we're using 128 gigs of SSD storage. This was all mainly done to supplement Windows 11 system requirements, so we're making this as fair as possible. Anyways, back to the comparison. Windows 10 does take the win here, however, Windows 11 was not too far behind. As always, startup doesn't determine everything, but it can give us a rough idea of what to expect. And here's a quick look at how much storage both operating systems take up with the same pre-installed programs. Windows 10 takes up exactly 40 gigabytes of storage, while Windows 11 takes up 41.1 gigabytes, giving Windows 10 the win here by a mere 1.1 gigabytes. Moving on to memory management, I tested this in two ways. First, I measured the amount of RAM being used while nothing was open in the background. Windows 10 took up 2.6 gigabytes of RAM, while Windows 11 took up 3.1 gigabytes. That's a 500 megabyte difference, and this can be especially significant if you don't have that much RAM in the first place. Next, I wanted to do a Chrome test where I tried to open as many tabs as possible in Google Chrome until we hit 5 gigabytes in Task Manager, and we can see the consequences of Windows 11 taking up more system RAM. Windows 10 got to 24 tabs and Windows 11 got to 20 tabs, another win for Windows 10. Next up is the battery test. Here I just ran a bunch of programs in the background that would drain the battery as quickly as possible. Speeding things up here, remember both were unplugged at almost the exact same time. Windows 10 takes the win here once again. Windows 11 is falling short by just a minute and a half. If you're curious, I've also provided the total amount of time it took for both machines to die. Remember, this was a highly intensive battery test, so I'd imagine in the real world, the scale would be even larger. Up next is audio editing. Here I loaded an Audacity project with a few MP3 files and an audio effect and exported everything into one WAV file. After running the export, Windows 11 comes out on top for the first time in this video, with Windows 10 coming in just milliseconds behind. I wanted to add these lightweight tests just in case the difference in speed was that large, but in this case, that didn't really happen. But now let's move on to something a bit heavier, and that's video editing. So things have changed in this department as well. Instead of using some random video editor, we're using something a bit more well known, and that is DaVinci Resolve 17. This is a pretty simple project, a video with some audio in the background at 1080p 30 fps, but it suffices for this hardware and our purposes. So speeding things up here because it does take quite a while, Windows 10 renders the entire project first, with Windows 11 coming in about 43 seconds later. And just like the battery test, here's the total amount of time it took for both operating systems to render the file if you're curious. Moving forward to application opening, I wanted to do a variety of different applications for this section, starting off with a classic Windows application control panel. Windows 10 does come in first and Windows 11 comes in about a half second later. Let's also try Windows Settings, which is a modern Windows application, and once again, Windows 10 comes out on top, with Windows 11 having a similar delay to Control Panel. Let's do something a bit heavier, Microsoft Word 2019. This application has very long loading times, but nevertheless, Windows 10 loads up the entire application first, but Windows 11 wasn't too far behind considering how long it usually takes to load Word. Let's move away from Microsoft for a little bit and try opening a PDF file with Adobe Reader, and similar results, Windows 10 comes in first with a small gap in Windows 11. Finally, let's try opening a video file via VLC Media Player, and surprise, surprise, Windows 10 opens before Windows 11 with a small delay. That's kind of funny actually. Windows 10 opened every single application before Windows 11, and the small gap between both was almost the exact same for every application. What a coincidence. And I know this isn't entirely OS dependent, but I wanted to quickly do a web page loading test with 3 websites. First was youtube.com, and Windows 11 fully loads the entire website first with about a half-second delay on Windows 10. This was then followed by apple.com, where Windows 11 takes the win here as well. Again, Windows 10 having this half-second delay. Finally was google.com, and they pretty much loaded them at almost the exact same time. Maybe Windows 10 came in a millisecond or two earlier. Okay, well, let's try something else. Something like file transfer. I loaded a USB flash drive with about a 4 gigabyte file and tried copying it over to the desktop of both OSs. Speeding things along here, Windows 11 finishes copying everything over first, and around 10 seconds later, Windows 10 finishes up doing the same thing. Just like before, here's the total amount of copying time for both operating systems if you're interested. Finally, before we get to the benchmarks, we've got a virus scanning test. I'll admit I did run into some issues with this test in particular, and I had to do some reinstallations of Malwarebytes, which is the software we're using, so just keep that in mind. It won't be as accurate as the other tests. Nevertheless, after the scan was run at the same time on both operating systems, Windows 11 completes the entire thing first, Windows 10 needing around 21 more seconds to complete the test, so there you go. And now it's time for the benchmarks. This time we've got a lot more software we're going to work with unlike previous videos, starting off with Geekbench 5. In single core performance, Windows 10 scored a 471 while Windows 11 scored a 472, a 1-point difference between both operating systems. Same goes with multi-core performance. Windows 10 scores a 1905 while Windows 11 scores a 1906, a 1-point difference once again. Technically speaking, Windows 11 does win in Geekbench, but practically speaking, they're basically the same thing. Moving on to our next benchmark, CPU-Z. In single-threaded performance, Windows 10 scores a 195.1 and Windows 11 scores a 195.7, less than a 1-point lead for Windows 11. Multi-threaded scores are a bit more interesting. Windows 10 takes the edge here by scoring a 1003.1 while Windows 11 scores a 1001.7, almost a 1.5-point gap. Again, just like the Geekbench scores, these 1-point gaps don't really make that much of a difference. Next benchmark I tried was Crystal Disk Mark. This one specifically measured the performance of your hard drive, or in this case your SSD, and well, here are the results. There are too many categories to cover here, but here's a general overview of what I found, and if you want to look at specific results you can pause the video here. So in terms of reading, Windows 11 generally performs either slightly better than or just as good as Windows 10. However, looking at the other side of things, Windows 11 had a significant deficiency in writing compared to Windows 10. If you were waiting for something interesting to happen, then well, you got what you wanted. I also wanted to conduct a Wi-Fi speed test using speedtest.net. Instead of taking the best of 10 tests, which is what I did in my previous comparisons, I tested each operating system 5 times and averaged out the upload and download speed on both. In terms of download speed, Windows 10 averaged to 88.078 megabits per second and Windows 11 averaged to 93.692 megabits per second, giving Windows 11 the win here. However, testing the upload speed was a completely different story. Windows 10 scored 88.784 megabits per second while Windows 11 performed worse at 80.438 megabits per second. Pretty strange. Alright, now let's move on to something more graphics intensive, starting with Cinebench, a very heavy benchmark especially for this hardware. After running the single core benchmark on both operating systems, Windows 10 loses out here by scoring a 439 compared to the higher 450 that Windows 11 scores. However, multi-core score was a different story. Windows 10 receives a 2033 versus 2003 on Windows 11, a 30-point difference. Last benchmark before we get to conclusions is Superposition. This benchmark was offered in multiple different resolutions and graphical effects, so first let's cover it when it's run at 720p low graphics. Windows 10 scores an 1892 and Windows 11 beats it out with a 1943. I also repeated the same benchmark with 1080p medium settings, and Windows 10 loses again with a 675 versus the 694 on Windows 11. And that's all the benchmarks. Windows 10 loses again with a 675 versus the 694 on Windows 11. Settings, and Windows 10 loses again with a 675 versus the 694 on Windows 11. And that's all the benchmarks. So let's try and make a reasonable conclusion out of this. Just know settings, and Windows 10 loses again with a 675 versus the 694 on Windows 11. The 694 on Windows 11. Note, mine is not the end-all be-all of conclusions. You can draw your own if you want, but I just want to give my own input. Based on what I call the real-world test, which is everything but the benchmarks, Windows 10 won almost every single one. Startup, storage, memory, battery, video editing, opening, a ton of them. There were just very few exceptions. However, I wouldn't say that Windows 10 completely destroyed Windows 11 or anything like that. They were still actually very, very close in performance, except for memory. If you're running Windows 11 on hardware with very low memory, or if you care a lot about memory in general, I would be cautious around Windows 11. It does take up quite a bit more RAM than its predecessor. Now, if we move to the more technical stuff, which are the benchmarks and the numbers, this is where things get a bit more confusing. Windows 11 did some things better than Windows 10, and Windows 10 did some things better than Windows 11. There really isn't any consistency here. I guess the best thing I can say in regard to the benchmarks is that if you're doing low-level single-core tasks, Windows 11 does a slightly better job doing that. On the other hand, Windows 10 does a slightly better job doing multi-core related tasks. However, again, the difference in performance is minuscule. Overall though, if I had to choose one winner, it would have to be Windows 10. It either outperforms or does just as well as Windows 11 in the majority of my tests, but I'm sticking to my same old statement. Don't choose an operating system solely for its performance. First priority should be its features and reliability. Speed should come afterwards. So, hopefully this video gives a better idea on how performance compares on both Windows 10 and 11. Like, subscribe, and thanks for watching. Today we'll be comparing Windows 10 to Windows 11. What's different in both versions of Windows? Well, let's go ahead and find out. Starting off with the start menu, Microsoft did a complete redesign. Pinned apps moved from the right side to the top half, and live tiles are now gone and are replaced with static icons in a grid. The search bar is now located in the start menu rather than being part of the taskbar, and those little side panel shortcuts that were on the left side are now at the bottom. And here's something not present in the Windows 10 start menu at all, and that's the new recommended section, and it shows recently used programs and files, which by the way, are also synced with OneDrive. Think of this as a much more simplified version of the timeline feature found in Windows 10's task viewer. The All Apps list, which was on the left side of the start menu in Windows 10, is now its own menu in Windows 11, using a button. And within the All Apps list, some older programs like Windows Explorer and Notepad are now part of the list rather than being part of the Windows System or Windows Accessories folder within the list. In fact, those folders are now completely removed and replaced with a shortcut to Control Panel called Windows Tools that lists many legacy built-in Windows programs that were previously in those folders. Moving on to changes in the taskbar, we see a lot of differences. The icons went from being left aligned to centered, although there is a setting to revert this, and if you look closely, the taskbar is also slightly taller in Windows 11. Hard to notice, but it is there. The UI for active and idle programs has been changed. It's now indicated by the color and length of a little line in the taskbar icon with a transparent rounded square around a program when active. The animation in the taskbar for apps that are doing certain actions have been redesigned. For example, here are both animations for downloading or installing something, and here are both animations for apps that need your attention, like the user account control prompt. There are now bouncy icon animations when you open or close programs. Badges on apps have gone a little redesign. If you hover over the search or task view icon, you get quick little actions you can do without needing to click the icon. The start button no longer changes color based on your accent color, as you can see. And now here's some features that got removed from the taskbar in Windows 11. Firstly, you can only dock the taskbar to the bottom now. No more top, left, or right docked taskbars. Sizing options like the small taskbar buttons are now gone, as well as the never combine setting that allows you to see text previews of the programs from the taskbar. Oh yeah, you also can't drag and drop files in the taskbar anymore for some reason, which is pretty bizarre. And right-clicking on the taskbar doesn't give all those little settings and shortcuts, just a shortcut to taskbar settings. Now here's just general UI changes. So starting off, say goodbye to the sharp corners in Windows 10 and say hello to the rounded corners in Windows 11. And this is no understatement. Every single element in Windows 11 is now round, even the very old stuff. There are now new animations for opening, minimizing, and maximizing a window. Windows very old stuff. There are now new animations for opening, minimizing, and maximizing a window. Windows 10 went for a more of a fade approach, while in Windows 11, the animation has a lot more resizing and fluidity.
Uh,
action going on. Almost every single icon in Windows 11 has been redesigned to stay consistent with its modern design language. Some elements of this were present in Windows 10, however now it's everywhere, even in legacy areas like the control panel. As with every modern version of Windows, there's a new wallpaper. Previously, there was the old hero wallpaper, which was light shining out of a Windows logo, and now the background is much like a blue bloom, if that makes any sense. Microsoft also introduced new themes. Previously in Windows 10, there were 4 themes to choose from by default. Now there are 6. Light mode is also now the new default theme for Windows 11 rather than the hybrid of a dark taskbar and light apps in Windows 10. The Windows logo has gone through a redesign. It now resembles the Microsoft logo a lot more. The lock screen has gone through some changes, but it's pretty underwhelming. To sum it up, elements of the lock screen have now been centered and the quick status is now removed. You can only show one app that shows detailed status. Windows 11 now introduces a new blur effect called Mica and Acrylic. The blur will always show your desktop wallpaper even if the window is on top of a window with a different color. Look at how Calculator's blur shows the desktop wallpaper as opposed to the white blur in the calculator in Windows 10 despite both being in front of Notepad. Windows 11 now has a new font called, and I'm definitely going to mispronounce this, Segoe UI Variable, which is Microsoft's modified version of the previous Segoe UI font found in Windows 10. To paraphrase, Microsoft basically says this is a more pleasing and easier font to read. The screen with the spinning logo when signing in or out, doing updates, restarting and stuff like that now only shows a black background, unlike Windows 10 where it takes your accent color and sets that as the color of the background. Similarly, depending on whether you're using the dark or light mode, opening apps with splash screens will only show a black or white background in Windows 11, rather than conforming to the color of the background with the accent color in Windows 10. Context menus throughout Windows 11 have now been updated to look more modern. However, there is still an option within the context menu called Show More Options that allows you to see the old one that is seen in Windows 10 if you need it for some reason. Alert boxes for things like changing display settings and low battery alerts now have a complete redesign in Windows 11. Unlike Windows 10, Windows 11 now has a colored line at the bottom of some text boxes. Finally, in Windows 11 Sign-In 10, Windows 11 now has a colored line at the bottom of some text boxes. Finally, in Windows 11 Sign-In screen, the text box is now dark instead of white in Windows 10, and the enter arrow looks like it's part of the text box rather than being on its own in Windows 10. In terms of system sounds, Windows 11 actually has different sounds between its dark mode and light mode. In dark mode, the sounds are a lot more echoed and muted, whereas in light mode, they are more clear and less echoed. It's actually very interesting. Here's a direct comparison of the sounds in Windows 10, Windows 11, and Windows 11's dark mode.
What happens if you don't activate Windows on your new PC? Well, you can expect 3 things to happen. The first and probably most annoying thing is that you're going to get this Activate Windows watermark in the bottom right of your screen no matter what you do. It is pretty faint, but if you're playing a game or doing just about anything, it'll be down there in that bottom right corner until you activate Windows. The second is if you right-click on the desktop and go down to Personalize, You actually can't change the background of your PC, nor can you turn on things like dark mode or enable any of the themes. They're all locked until you activate Windows. And then the last one that a lot of people won't mind is that you may not get all of the Windows updates. You're still going to get the essential ones, but some of the optional updates aren't actually going to roll out to your computer, which I don't know about you, I actually might prefer. What happens if you don't activate Windows on your new PC?
Next, let's talk about the action. Next, let's talk about the Action Center overhaul in Windows 11, which actually isn't even called Action Center anymore. It's separated into two menus called Quick Settings and Notifications. Quick Settings is not only an area that shows the toggles found at the bottom of the Action Center in Windows 10, but it now also shows the new place for your volume, brightness, and even your Wi-Fi controls. In Windows 10, all three of those were in separate menus. Now, if you click, let's say, the network icon in the system tray, it won't take you to a separate network flyout, it will now take you to the entire Quick Settings menu instead. This menu can also be accessed using the Windows A shortcut. On your keyboard, which is the same shortcut that opens the Action Center in Windows 10. The other menu is the Notifications menu, which is now part of the calendar. Now the notifications are found above the calendar instead of within Action Center, and not only are the notifications round, but they're also no longer inside a bar like it was in Windows 10. You also have a shortcut to Focuses settings in the Settings app. This menu can also be accessed using the Windows N shortcut on your keyboard. And if you're curious about what
Kardeş tez ol oyun başlıyor.
18. mertebeydi he? Geldim.
What's changed about the calendar, you'll be pretty disappointed. It has absolutely no integration with anything, and the detailed clock that showed seconds is also gone. All it shows is the day, and that's about it. Luckily, you can minimize the calendar within the notifications menu if you don't want to see it. And here's a little comparison of the newsfeed in Windows 10 and the widgets panel in Windows 11. Now, don't be fooled, these are pretty much almost the exact same thing, they just look different and are found in different areas of Windows. The newsfeed is found near the system tray, and the widgets panel is accessed via a taskbar icon or by using the Windows W shortcut on your keyboard. Last thing to note is that the newsfeed is customized using Microsoft Edge, while the widgets panel is partially customized within the panel, partially through Microsoft Edge as well. Microsoft has also made a number of changes to Snap Assist and multitasking features. Starting off, the task viewer has now been simplified in Windows 11, and the timeline feature that is found in Windows 10 has now been removed. You can now choose a different wallpaper for each virtual desktop in Windows 11 rather than only one for every single one in Windows 10. The Snap Assist preview now has a frosted glass look rather than the transparent glass in Windows 10. The animation when you actually preview and snap a window has been changed. Funnily enough, Windows 10 doesn't even have an animation when you snap the window. And generally speaking, Snap Assist is transparent glass in Windows 10. The animation when you actually preview and snap a window has been changed. Funnily enough, Windows 10 doesn't even have an animation when you snap the window. And generally speaking, Snap Assist is just much smarter and is able to do more than it used to in Windows 10. So, for example, when snapping a window in a quadrant, Windows 11 will try and assist you in finding other windows, while in Windows 10, snapping to a quadrant does nothing. When using Snap Assist to snap different windows on different parts of the screen, Windows will now automatically sort those windows into a group, and those groups can now be previewed and opened in the taskbar. Windows 10 doesn't have this feature, so groups don't show up when hovering on a taskbar icon. The line seen when resizing apps side by side now has a new look. When you're actually using it, it disappears in Windows 11 while still being present in Windows 10. Here's a look at differences in built-in programs and apps. Now, many of the applications in Windows 11 have been updated and more updates are to come even after its release. However, because there are just so many to cover in one video, here are just the biggest highlights. Starting with File Explorer, there have been various UI changes. There is now a replacement to the ribbon UI found at the top of the File Explorer, which tries to simplify and get rid of all the clutter that was the old ribbon UI. It'll also have less spaced out icons by default, which can be reverted if you don't like that, and 3D Objects is no longer its own dedicated folder. The Settings app has gone a complete overhaul. It's now supposed to be easier to navigate, more organized, and overall just look better. You'll see more enlarged icons and pictures that make the UI easier to use, and even some new animations. And just like the Settings app, the Microsoft Store is also getting a huge revamp with a new UI and various improvements. However, one of the best parts is that the store is now open to accepting more app types, such as EWA, which are web apps, Win32, which are like the .exe installers, even Android apps, though support for those will be delayed. This app is also coming to Windows 10, which is a huge bonus. Skype, which was preloaded in Windows 10, has now been removed in favor of the Microsoft Teams integration system built into Windows 11. However, you can still install Skype again if you really need it. Internet Explorer is finally disabled from Windows 11. You can try, it is nowhere to be found, so your only option is Microsoft Edge. It's still there in Windows 10, but not on Windows 11. Microsoft has also done a lot to make sure It's still there in Windows 10, but not on Windows 11. Microsoft has also done a lot to make sure Windows 11 is consistent and removing duplicate Windows accessories that were present in Windows 10. So, what they're basically doing is they're updating a legacy Windows accessory and removing the duplicate version. For example, Snip and Sketch has been removed and a newly updated snipping tool is now here with a more modern UI and various features from Snip and Sketch. This is also going to be done with Paint in the future, where Paint 3D is removed by default and the old MS Paint is going to be updated with not only with a new look, but with new features as well. Windows Terminal is now a preloaded application in Windows 11 and aims to unify command prompt, PowerShell, and other command lines into just one app. Alarms and Clock is now just called Clock and has a new feature called Focus Sessions aimed to help people pace themselves to reach their goals. And aside from other little updates to apps, pretty much all the built-in Windows applications have been and will be updated with Windows 11's new design language, including rounded corners and new blur effects. Here's a quick rundown of preloaded apps on one OS that are not there by default on the other, and these are apps that I haven't mentioned yet. 3D Viewer, Math Info Panel, Mixed Reality Portal, OneNote for Windows 10, and the People app are all the preloaded exclusives on Windows 10, while Get Started, Microsoft News, and Microsoft To Do are the preloaded exclusives on Windows 11. All of these can still be installed through the Microsoft Store on both OSs, except for Math Input Panel, the People app, and Get Started. Now let's change perspective.
Windows 12 is coming sooner than you think. Like in the days of Windows XP, Microsoft is returning to releasing a major Windows upgrade every 3 years like it used to. Since Windows 11 was released in 2021, Windows 12 is on track to arrive in 2024. Windows 12 is coming sooner than you think. Like in the days of Windows XP, Microsoft is returning.
Why hasn't Microsoft released Windows 12 yet, even though it's been 4 years since Windows 11 came out? The real reason is kind of rage bait. Most people assumed they just forgot, but Saibao, that's not the case. Windows 11 was mid at best. Let's be real, most people preferred Windows 10. And if you look back, Microsoft has always had this weird cycle with their operating systems. Vista, Fire, Windows 7, Legendary, Windows 8, Buns, Windows 10, actually solid, but the point is, they usually put out a new version pretty quick. So why has it been 4 years and 67 days with nothing? Out of nowhere, Microsoft just decided to stall. But here's the catch. The real reason isn't that they're lazy, or that Windows 11 was so good they don't need a new one. Nah, Microsoft is holding back Windows 12 on purpose. They're trying to make it their first AI-powered operating system, where Copilot and machine learning aren't just apps you install, they're baked into the system itself. Why hasn't Microsoft released Windows 12 yet, even though it's been
When is Windows 12 coming? If rumors are to be believed, it's going to be cloud-focused, heavily AI-integrated, and subscription-based. So what is the truth? A few years ago, we believed that Microsoft followed a 3-year development cycle. That means we should have seen Windows 12 last year. But because of some behind-the-scenes changes, including the head of Windows leaving, there's a slight change of plans. So it is expected that Windows 12 should be revealed right about now, and released later this year, or early 2026. The reason why Microsoft hasn't revealed anything is because they want people to switch to Windows 11, not wait for 12. That's a stupid idea, but okay. What we're also hearing is heavy AI features. This means even higher system requirements for your computer. Like there was a TPM requirement for Windows 11, there might be an NPU requirement for
Dirección que voy a llamar a tu mamá.
Windows 12 has been leaked. During the Microsoft Ignite event, a screen
What if there was a song about Lost in Translation in the style of jazz? It's lost in translation, patabatation, flabada.
The Starter Edition is the most basic and most limited Windows. The Starter Edition is the most basic and most limited Windows edition ever made by Microsoft. This edition existed only in Windows 7, and in it you could not perform most of the tasks you would normally have expected to be able to do in Windows. For example, you could not change the Windows theme, you could not connect the system to more than one monitor, you did not have the default Windows 7 games, you could not see previews or thumbnails of open apps in the taskbar, and you could not even change the desktop background. Windows 7 Starter was only available in 32-bit version and could support a maximum of 2 GB of RAM, even if your system had 4 GB installed. At the time of Windows 7's release, this operating system was mostly pre-installed on cheap and low-power laptops and notebooks. In general, if you have a very weak system and only want to watch videos, browse the web, store files, or simply check the date and time, Windows 7 Starter is made for you. The Home Edition is a more advanced and more popular version of the Starter Edition. Unlike Starter, which only existed in Windows 7, The Home Edition is available in all Windows versions, including Windows 7, 8, 8.1, 10, and 11. In Windows 7, the Home Edition came in two versions, Home Basic and Home Premium. In Home Basic, you could
like you, be strong to hold the powers of the sun. To dream, believe. In strength now I'm the only one.
Using an old monitor on a relatively modern PC. Using an old monitor
So I cut the cobra. Why they got me bookie? Texting my phone, hey bookie. Ha ha. Hey dookie. Hey.
I have something to tell you. Come closer, closer.
Listen here, you piece of shit.
Oh, okay, nigga. Oh, okay, nigga.